So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Software Consultants Year-End Preparation webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the Sage 100 Contractor archiving your Sage 100 Contractor company. Just a few housekeeping items as usual. We are recording today, so we will send a link out to everybody who signed up and could not attend. There will not be any questions or answers section to today's meeting because we are going to provide Dion's contact information at the end where you guys can reach out. So, we all know the spiel. We've been through that before. So our agenda today, we've done introductions before, but I'm Misty Palick. I'm a seasoned and Sage 100 Contractor certified consultant. I use Sage 100 Contractor in industry for 11 years, and then I've been helping clients like you for the past 6 years. Our objectives today are: why should you archive? How are you preparing for your archive? Did you know that there's a job closeout procedure? So many companies miss this piece. And where can you find help for archiving? And then finally, we're going to give you the contact information for Dion to get in contact with me or Dion and assist you with all your needs. So let's see. I'm not sure that this fine gentleman here is really Santa, but he kind of looks like Santa to me. So I chose to include this picture. But if you think about a company archive, and we kind of talked about this in our last week's webinar where we were talking about archiving payroll. If you think about an archive as a little present from Santa, then you'll kind of understand the concept behind Sage 100 Contractor and the archiving process, because what it's doing is it's packaging up your year's company GL, and it's putting it in a nice little present and storing it outside of the regular company file, and then it's putting a little bow on it for you. So if you can think about the archiving process in that manner, I think it'll really help you solidify the concept of what an archive is in Sage 100 Contractor. So I thought this was also funny. So you're doing your backups, so Santa doesn't have to call tech support, which is really, really important these days. Just so you know, I am not a CPA or a tax advisor of any kind. So if I mention things like the taxes or whatever in Sage 100 Contractor, please don't try this at home and reach out to your CPA. A GL archive in Sage 100 Contractors, like a nice little present. And I want to take a minute to talk about the backups. So we're kind of moving backwards just a little bit. I'm looking at my notes here instead of just going rogue on you guys. Backups can be automated through Sage's database administrator. So you don't have to remember to do it manually, but these backups should be happening every single night, unless you're like a company where maybe you only have 5 or 10 transactions happening every day. But anything over 10 transactions a day, meaning are you entering bills, payroll, accounts receivable, I think that that's a good gauge. And that tells you that even at 10 transactions, you need to be backing up your data. Backups are so important. And that doesn't mean you just back up the file on your laptop and then you take it home and that it's safe. That you really should have a plan of attack for your backups, meaning you store them in the cloud in a secure manner, or maybe you have a server file that's backed up with the entire server every night. But you should not keep your backups in the same place that you keep your company file. That's just sort of a given. I know that's probably an old-fashioned thing to say because, hey, we're all used to backups by now, hopefully. So if you are doing backups, which I hope you are, something that will give you a really nice indicator of, man, my data really needs to be backed up, is if it's taking forever. So if your backup at night is taking more than an hour, then something needs to be done with archiving your data, because again, Sage 100 Contractor is just a giant database, and eventually it's going to get overgrown and needs to be cleaned up. So if you're keeping that in mind, if your backups are taking a long time, it's time to archive. Let's talk about, I also found this picture. I love pictures, guys. I love to share them with you guys. This is really fun for me. So I enjoy just sharing my thoughts here with this. So when do you archive? And as we talked about in our last webinar, we talked about the payroll has to be done every year. That is mandatory by Sage, but the GL archive is recommended every other year. And my kids would say, hey, Mom, you know how you think that stop signs are just a recommendation or speed limits are just a recommendation? terrible driver. This is also something to think about. That it is a recommendation, but it probably should be done every other year. If you're a smaller company, you don't have 1 million transactions, maybe you could do it every 2 years, but it should be done at some point. Because again, this is just a database and it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And as you add daily records, it's just going to keep growing. So just as we all look back at 2020 and think, what just happened? You should be thinking about your company data in Sage and preparing for a year-end review. And again, if your backups are taking forever to complete every night, then you should really take that as an indicator that you need to archive because your database is overgrown and needs groomed. So I just found this picture hilarious of 7.6 billion reviews. Very bad, would not recommend. Yep, I think we're all sick of 2020. Okay, let's see. Oh, and so here too, no time limit. So it's just a recommendation that you get to archive it, but it should be done every other year in my personal professional opinion. So we kind of covered this in the last class as well with the payroll archives, but I just want to reiterate where the archives are kept. And so this is Sage 100 Contractor, of course, and down here in the bottom, it's change company access. So if I click on that and I say show archives, I would naturally, if I had archived anything, if I had done payroll, the sample company, anything like that, then it would show up here. And that is our nice little present from Santa with a bow on it, where we could go into that year's company data, see what we needed to see, and kind of fix, whatever we needed to do in the archiving company. So I just want to show you again where the archives are kept. Does not mean that your data disappears. I want to stress that point because it does freak out people. They're like, oh, my company data for that year is all gone. No, it isn't. It's just in the archive. So again, if you think about it in the present format, that it's just wrapped up in a different present underneath a different tree. So that's kind of, I wanted to cover that again because that does kind of scare some people. They're like, what happened to my data? It's just kept in the archive. You'll notice that payroll is kept separate. We talked about that last time. And you can lock certain people out of certain companies. If you didn't want your project managers in the sample company, then you could lock them out of that company just by removing their user within that company database. So something else in Sage that I want to show you that probably a lot of you know, but something I enjoy. Let's see if we can get our mouse to cooperate today. And we'll go back into our sample company. That's fine. No problem. Okay, and we go to utilities and company information. And in company information, let me pop this down here. There is a way to change your company color. So if you're color coordinated like I am, I love color. But if you're color coordinated like me, you can change this company color information down here. Let's see, where's our little table going to come up? And you can make it any color you want. So what I really recommend a lot of companies do is they will, they will change their company information or their color to like a different color for the archive. It's not going to let me pull it up here because it's being difficult. But you could change your archive companies. Each year can have its own color, which is pretty cool. So what it does is in the background here, boy, my computer is being weird today, guys. Must be solar flares. It knows it's Friday. That's what it is. In the background information here, you could change this company color. Oh, now it's even going to give me grief about that. There we go. So when you click on that little button, then the color of the company lets you select a color, just like a color picker. But what it does is it changes this background back here in the back part of Sage. So on your Sage desktop, that could be any color you wanted. And they have pretty pinks and purples and all that kind of stuff. So you can see, as soon as my mouse comes back to me here, you can see here, it's going crazy now. You can see that this area here would be a different color, which is a great feature to have if you're in an archive company. You definitely don't want to make transactions. Really, that's just for historical data. So if you're in an archive company, it will notify you, hey, you're in an archive company. Are you sure you want to make these transactions? But it's just a visual to tell you which company you're in. So I see a lot of companies change their archive company colors to red or blue or green or whatever have you. And also you can have multiple company databases within Sage 100 Contractor. So you could easily change, like if you've got ABC Construction and then ABC Concrete, and they are both ran by you're the Sage person for both companies. You could have multiple instances of Sage 100 Contractor open and have ABC Concrete be a different color than ABC Construction. That way you always know what company you're in based on the color. Now it only changes the desktop. It doesn't get too fancy and change, anything up at the top or anything, or any modules, but it just kind of changes the desktop to give you a nice visual notifier that you're in a certain company based on color. So I like to just talk about that. I know it's simple. You probably all know about it, but I just thought I'd share. And this is actually a slide from last week because, Santa sees you when you're sleeping and it's coming upon us fast. So I again want to reiterate, where do you find help for performing an archive? Of course, you can always reach out to Dion and he'll get in contact with me and we can get you taken care of that way. But if you're on your own, you're going Han Solo here. On the Home and Resources tab, you can go to Product Documents, Year-End Guide, which will open an internet browser, and it will pull up this guide. And I say this every time, but this will be updated in January 2021 for the next year. So this is maintained and updated by Sage. So as you can see here, it's a great checklist. It's just a really nice way to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing? Here's a year-end processes. It has some check boxes. If you get down to that point, it tells you which reports to run. And this is about payroll, which we talked about. But if you get down here to say, let's see what page it starts on, it will tell you you should run these reports. You should check these numbers, because once you archive a company, you're going to open that company back up just to verify that everything got transferred okay. So it's taking that year's data, it's packaging it up for you. You're going to open the archive, and then you're going to be able to see your records. So it's all about backup and validation. So it's just a really great checklist. You can get there from the Home and Resources tab, Product Documents, Year-End Guide. So then you don't have to think about, where is that again? You could also just Google it. There's a lot of ways to get there, but I like that one the best. So that one's just a reminder. Back to our little slideshow here. So you do perform the database or the archive in the database administrator program. It used to be done inside of Sage 100 Contractor directly, but they switched that quite a few years ago, and now you do it through the database administrator. Just a note, no one could be logged into Sage while you're doing an archive, whether that be payroll or your regular company archive, your GL archive. Nobody can be logged in. You have to be logged in exclusively through the database administrator to make this happen. So I, spend a lot of time when I do archives, doing it after hours or on the weekends, so not to inconvenience the client. Just a thought there. Is it necessary to archive? Again, GL is recommended every other year. We kind of talked about that. And what happens in the GL archive is a little bit different than the payroll archive, because you get to choose whether to remove all the jobs that are closed or in remove status from Sage 100 Contractor and package them in your other archived year. I typically don't do that. I actually just archive everything, and then I come back to the current year and I remove those jobs that belong in the past year. The reason I do that is because I just like the ability to control what it's removing. Because when the archive process, it says, do you want to remove all the jobs that have closed and refused status? And I'm not positive what it's removing. Like I would have to go run a list, figure out how many jobs it's removing. Like, it doesn't give you the option to control which jobs you're removing. So I choose to do it this other way. I archive everything, and then I go to the current year and I delete the jobs I remove the jobs that I don't want in the current year, because I know they're already in the company archive. So that's just a recommendation that I've learned over the years. It's just easier to be able to control which jobs are being removed instead of it's all or nothing. Just a heads up there. And then this is something that, they always say that necessity is the mother of invention. That's one of my favorite sayings. And this is something that I kind of invented back in the day when I was working in Sage 100 Contractor and industry. And the reason is because you have to note that there is a closeout procedure, and that closeout procedure for a job might be different for every organization as to what they do. It could be all the punch list items are done. It could be all the drawings are stored in a certain way with a certain name. The file on the server is moved to completed jobs. So there's things outside of Sage that should be happening as you're closing out jobs. But there is an actual procedure inside of Sage 100 Contractor that you could do for closing out your jobs, which you should be doing these things just naturally. But if you're not, it's something to think about. So what I'm going to show you is the cost to complete. And some of you may know this information already. So, I kind of apologize if this is a repeat for you. But this is one of my favorite modules inside of Sage. And let's see, we're going to drag this down here. And what this is it's basically live information. So it doesn't hit the books, it doesn't change any of your data. It's really just kind of like a live dashboard for a job to figure out scenarios. So you could use this to figure out, okay, I know that I budgeted $468,000 on this job. I'm at $396,000. So I could say to myself as a project manager, I am absolutely sure that I am done with this job. I have nothing more to do on this job. And it does the math for you. So when you come in here, just to show you around a little bit, you would do options update. What that does is it goes out into the system, finds any new costs that you have, compares it against the existing budget, gives you that percentage of completion just based on budget. And then you actually have a column called actual. And this is really powerful to figure out scenarios. So if you said, I am absolutely sure I'm done with this job, I have no more work to do on it. I hit calculate. It actually tells me if I'm going to be over or under my budget, which is pretty darn cool. So I had a lot more costs than my budget, right? So I'm $434,000 over my budget. Boy, I better be thinking about my job, don't you think? Like I might not have a job after this one. That's a lot of money. But it also gives you a lot of insight into the project. So I can see here that I have cost codes on my project that I don't have a budget for, which can cause a problem later on. Like you should be driving this with your budget. So you can see, oh, somebody put something to cost code 1520 for $215. So then you could go out and research, well, where did that $215 come from? Who did that? Right? So you can find somebody to blame for that and get it fixed. But this gives you the ability to predict how you're going to come out on a job. So this is a really powerful tool. And if you're not using it, then I really recommend you research it and figure out, how it's working. The help file, again, in Sage is really fabulous. And you can find out anything you need to know on any window just by going help about this window or hitting F1 on your keyboard. So you can see here, now if I'm just predicting and I'm a project manager, I can hit delete on my keyboard just to take that away, just so I could, kind of come back to original state and say, okay, but I want you to know, again, it does not hit your books. It's not affecting any records. It's really just a live way for you as a project manager, or, maybe you're the CFO or the controller for the company, and you need to figure out these cost to completes for, your job reporting or whatever. But something to think about is, and the reason I'm showing you this is because in the job closeout procedure that I, kind of invented, was you need to do an internal budget change order. And a lot of companies, they don't think about these things, and they just kind of, it's survival mode. So they're just flying at 110 miles an hour and they don't have time to slow down. But there comes a point when you're going to have to archive your company data because it's getting too big, and you should be thinking about reconciling your jobs. And you use the cost to complete to find out where you are at the end of the job. So if this job was really truly all done, and I had come down here and put 100% for my actuals, I figured out what I'm over and under. And now I need to do a change order for that $433,000 under these each cost code so that I am reconciling the budget. And the reason that you want to do that, you don't want to go messing with your original budget because that's historical data that you really don't want to mess up. So you could use an internal change order to toggle that information. So if you create an internal change order to these cost codes, adjusting by the over under billing amount, then when you create an internal change order, you mark it as approved because that's how it hits the job and the books. And then if you wanted to go back in time and see how you did on the original budget, you could just make that change order back to review status. And then it works as a toggle switch. You turn it off and on by controlling the status on the change order. Just a thought here. But the reason you want to adjust your budget down or up to actual is because if you're running reports like the bonding report or the over under billings report, if you don't do that, everything is based on your budget and it's going to tell you that you still have costs to complete when you really don't. So that's one of the major things about doing a job reconciliation so that you can close it, is making sure that you're doing this internal change order that I'm talking about. Other things to think about. Let's, on the job, there's other things to think about when you're reconciling. So making sure that all your subcontracts and purchase orders have been fully billed and have a status closed. The fully billed part is way more important than the status closed, but you definitely want to make sure that you don't have anything left on those subcontracts or POs to pay the vendor. And also that you maybe bill the owner for all of those things. And then making sure that there is no retention left on these same POs and subcontracts. So retention has to fully be completed. Making sure that there's no AR invoice balances, even retention. And the reason I'm showing the job screen is because you can really do this from your job screen. You can really, click on your buttons down here and see all this information from your job screen. You need to make sure that there's no AP bill balances or retention on accounts payable. Make sure that there's no payroll to be left computed to the job, so that all of that has to be taken care of before you can truly close a job. Doing an internal change order like we talked about, and then actually closing the job by using the job status. I know that some companies, they're like, oh yeah, I closed those jobs because they went to this job status, they popped it down, they changed it to closed. Well, there's a lot more to closing out a job than just marking it closed, right? You should be reconciling your jobs because it affects all your reports. So it's very important that you do this process. It doesn't usually take very long. And typically, I've helped so many companies just to do this for them because they don't have time to think about it. They don't want to think about it. I know the process. So, usually I get connected with companies that just need me to close out all their jobs, reconcile their jobs, clean them up, and then I help them with the archival process because they don't have time to think about it. So, we normally do a lot of that kind of business. So if you are interested in something like that, you could certainly talk to Dion and we could get something worked out. But it's more, for job closeout, it's way more than just marking a job closed. That's really the point that I want to stress the most, because that's easy and anybody could do that. But there's so much more to a job closeout, and even outside of Sage 100 Contractor, like I was discussing, making sure that the drawings are all tied up, that the punch list is done. There's so much more to actually closing a job than just going, okay, I'm done, cool, great, I marked it closed. And then again, I typically, you can only remove jobs from a current database that are closed or refused. So, as you're closing these jobs and you're scrubbing your job list, which I use the bonding report for that. So I'm always running the bonding report. That's my favorite report within Sage 100 Contractor, so that I can see how much I have to complete. Did I bill everything? It shows change orders, it has all the gooey stuff that is important for overhead accounting to make sure that your jobs are closed. I also used that a lot every month for billing purposes when I was in industry. So I would run my bonding report, and several project managers had the ability to create their own job number inside Sage 100 Contractor. That's never something that I recommend. So if you can control that cookie jar, then I think you absolutely should. I think jobs and vendors are something that you should lock down and control, that only certain people are allowed to set those up, because a lot goes into that. And if you don't set it up right in the beginning, then garbage in, garbage out. And that's what's going to happen to you. So, if you are setting up your jobs correctly, but I would use my bonding report to see who set up a job and didn't tell me about it, because I would be able to see it on the bonding report. And I would say, okay, who did this? And we could get it resolved and get everything scrubbed up and looking nice. I also used the cost to complete when I was in industry for billing purposes. So, your schedule of values could match your budget. It would match your dollar amount for your budget, because again, those are budgeted items, not selling amounts. But you could easily use that functionality within the cost to complete to get the billing ideas. So I would have my project managers log into Sage, use that actual column as a percent billed. So that's how they would communicate to me. I would go into the same cost to complete and go, okay, look down in the schedule of values, using the cost codes. He said 10% on this item, 12% on this item, nothing on this item. And that's how I would match up to my progress billing. So if you make them all match, your budget, your proposal, your progress billing, if all of those schedules of values match based on cost codes, you could use the cost to complete module to communicate with your project managers and back and forth, so that you could figure out what to bill each month. Just a really good idea to, keep that communication open instead of flying emails or, using Teams or something. So I know that's an incredible amount of information, but I just want to stress that job closeout is incredibly important. And I think that it's something that gets neglected a lot, which really needs to be taken care of. And let's talk about what's next. Can you believe next year is next? I have a hard time believing that myself. Like, wow, that's pretty crazy. So next year, we are going to be talking about W-2s and what happens with W-2s inside the system. We already talked about 1099s. We've talked about all sorts of good stuff. So again, we like to keep these short and sweet so that everybody's time is important and that everybody can get off and do their Friday things. I really want to sincerely say thank you for joining me for these webinars. And I'm really, wishing you happy holidays for whatever that you celebrate. I hope that you get to be with family. I know this is a really weird year for everybody, but even if it's virtually, I hope that, your holidays are wonderful. Here is Dion's contact information in case you need to get in contact. And that's all I have for you guys. So as Porky Pig would say, that's all, folks. Have a great holiday.